Hello chess friends and welcome to Title's Chess channel and welcome to a very special game that happened recently. It was of course the derby of Chess Engine. Now these days it was the match game between Fritz 2 and Stockfish 13. This game wouldn't be so special, but I'm sure that you're familiar with the saga that happened recently between chess-based developers and also between Stockfish developers. What happened is that chess-based developers used the Stockfish code, and then they tried to sell it. We know that Stockfish is always giving up this engine for free. You can use really this great analysis always for free, but Fritz 2 or this chess-based developers tried to sell it, and as I mentioned before, will simply stop with that saga. But still I have decided to give really our friend Fritz 2 a new avatar. I think it's a great avatar. It's our great android with this great dollar shirt, and we have also an upgrade for Stockfish and in UE we have now the Stockfish 13 with also this very cool avatar. So these avatars we're using now in the continuation of any tournament, of any chess engine tournament, and we have also I think cool avatars for Lila C0. Then I use also some Mortal Kombat characters for some other chess engines. So I think we can agree with these two cool avatars. They're really cool. I think this Fritz 2 is really beautiful t-shirt. And let's check out now one game. I think it was a really incredible game. It was in a Dutch defense, but the game didn't start as a Dutch defense, and basically this Dutch defense is a positional setup, but here Stockfish 13 will find great strategical ideas, great tactical ideas. I think this was so far the best game between Fritz 2 and Stockfish 13. As usual in this top engine games we have this beautiful sound, so let's check out round 1 and 5. So c4 here played by Fritz 2. We have e6, knight to c3, f5. So as I said, here in this game, white would transpose into normal Dutch defense ideas, into normal Dutch defense structures, but still I would always call any opening which black plays with the move f5 as a Dutch defense, especially because d4 will probably happen now. Here after the move g3, we have knight to f6, bishop to g2, bishop to e7, Stockfish 13 goes into normal development. Here we have e3 with preparations to cement simply the position around the square d4, knight to e2 is the possibility, and then to play the knight on a very active square on f4. I use many times a different setup. I play simply here something like d4, then I go knight to h3, and I've explained some of my ideas how to beat the Dutch defense. I'll show you the link of the series afterwards, so you can also check it out if you have trouble maybe to beat the Dutch defense. I think these videos will be very instructive for you. You have really a clear setup. Here after the move bishop to e7, we said e3 happened, we have castling, and now knight to e2, we have c6. So Stockfish 13 builds really this normal Dutch defense structures, this stonewall setups. Will here Stockfish 13 will build really this fortress on life force, but there is always one strategical problem when you build these fortresses with pawns. When you put too many pawns on the same color squares, then your bishop, for instance this bishop on c8, is really a bad bishop. It's blocked out simply by its own pawn, so that's why this bishop really needs improvement in the continuation of the game. So here d4, we have d5, here b3, and now bishop to d7, and now castling, we have bishop to e8. You see Stockfish 13 tried with this maneuver, and this maneuver is very often played, I think, from black's perspective in the Dutch defense. Black is searching here for at least some kind of a new activity for the light square bishop. Here of course it's really bad. Even if you try here to develop it with b6 and bishop to a6, then black could go, I think, into a very cool idea, and it's simply to get out of the range of the bishop. So many pieces are of course here on the long diagonal, but white can play knight to f4, rook to e1, and then this bishop is aiming into nothing. So that's why this idea to play bishop to e8 and then bishop to h5 is really a great choice, because at least we're attacking here some light squares on the king side. So we want to trade off the light square bishops. And here I want you maybe to pause the video and take your time, evaluate a little bit the position, search for positional trades of pieces, try to ask yourself this question: which piece would you love to have on the board, which piece you wouldn't love to have on the board. So let's give that a little bit let's take our time here. Let's think about good pieces. Let's think about bad pieces. So here it's our
Test your
first
might.
test your might. So these structures are very, very important to recognize, because these structures always are telling us that many pieces are bad. So in my opinion, really, I think what white would love to do is to trade off this dark square bishop for this dark square bishop, because although this bishop can be maybe developed to b2, maybe in some occasions to a3, but still it's really blocked out by its own pawn. So black would love to give up the light square bishop maybe for this bishop, because this bishop has a good activity here, and is of course also the key defender in front of the king. So the knights, I think, in this closed setups are very good. So you should always find good squares on the board. What we can do from white's perspective is to play on a powerful outpost, maybe knight to f4, then knight to d3, and then knight to e5. The bad part for black here is that you cannot kick away this move knight to e5 with any pawns, because you have played too many pawns, you have advanced the pawns too much. The potential outpost by black on e4, that's the good part for white, can be always kicked away with the potential f3 move. So far, I think when it comes to central battle, white has here a slightly advantage. When it comes to piece activity, black is gaining now more and more a better piece activity, because black has found really good way to develop this light square bishop, at least somehow, in the continuation of the game. So now if we have evaluated the position, I think it's very important to recognize what's going on here. And when we search now for the direction of the attack, it's obvious that white will coordinate the attack towards the queen side, because here we could have a space advantage with the move c5. Also, this pawn are showing us the direction of the attack. On the other hand, black's direction of the attack in the Dutch defense is many times simply knight to e4. This knight will be very powerful, and then to try push here the pawns on king side, g5, h5, and similar stuff. So I wanted you really to recognize this, because first we should always evaluate our piece strength, also find the direction of the attack, and also watch always what's going on in the center with the pawns. What kind of a pawn structure do we have now? When we have solved now the strategical ideas, let's continue with our analysis. Knight to f4. Here Fat Fritz 2 takes out now very important squares for the light square bishop. g6, bishop to h5 is not a possibility. Here we have bishop to f7. At least, as I said, Stockfish 13 found new ways how to develop the light square bishop. We have bishop to b2, and now knight to d7. Here c5, and now the game becomes more and more blocked. So now after the move c5, we have really the change of dynamics. Here we had dynamics on the square c4. Now we have statics, and whenever you see the statics, whenever you see that the pawn structure gets more and more fixed, then the knights are very good. The knights are getting better into the game. What black should probably search for here is a potential e5 pawn breakthrough. So e5 is the main goal, as we said. Here also b4 with b5 is of course white's goal here in the continuation of the game. So king to h8, we have knight to d3, cementing here the position around the square e5. We have now g5 immediately by Stockfish 13, really wild move. Well, and that's in its opposite side attack games. We have still this opposite side attack game, I've told you. So white is continuing the attack on the queen side, black is continuing the attack on the king side. The cool part, I think, for black here is that black attacks the king, white attacks simply pawns. And when I play this opposite side attack games, I always like to attack my opponent's king. So although the evaluation is here slightly better for white, it's many times better for white in Dutch defenses. Here I think with the move g5, we have a great preparation to break the position with the move f4. So f4 is also a nice possibility, but still this move has to be prepared with maybe something like knight to h5, could be also a possibility, and then to break the position with the move f4. So here a4. So Fat Fritz 2 continues also here the queen side attack. We have h5, so Stockfish 13 is not losing any tempi. Attack simply the king side. Here we have b4 and now h4. We have b5. You see, both engines are playing on their side where they're better. We have h takes g3, h takes g3, and now king to g7. A very nice move by Stockfish 13. Stockfish is now developing here the rook on the h file. Gets really clearance. Now what we can also notice many times in the Dutch defense, from white's perspective, you see the knight on f3. And I think these knights are a little bit misplaced here, the knight on d3 and the knight on c3, although of course they have good ideas. The knights are controlling the center of the board. It's not a problem about that. But when we come to defenders in front of white king, I think white is simply left with only one defender. It's only the bishop on g2, and that's supposed to be our best attacking piece. So I think already something went wrong here for Fritz 2. We have a5, we have a6, c takes b5 is not so good because you're inviting simply too many pieces now into the game. You shouldn't do that. We have to wait. There is also this defensive strategy. I've explained also this defensive strategy in one of my basics in chess series. If you're familiar more with my YouTube chess channel, I'll show you also that link. One of the best defensive strategies sometimes is not to touch anything. Just don't touch anything, don't take out, wait your opponent to do something and then maybe react afterwards. So far we don't have to really touch anything, and here after the move a6 it forces now some kind of a new trade of pawns, but at least we haven't invited here our opponent's pieces into the game. So here a6 was played. Let's see again the possible continuation after c takes b5, knight to b5, and you see now knight to d6 could happen. The knight comes on a very active square, and after maybe something like bishop to e8 we have bishop to a3. This bishop would be very dangerous. It supports the pawn. Now there are ideas knight to e5, then maybe f3 e4. So white would have real powerful central control with his bishop, with his pawn, with the knight on e5. So white would have really a comfortable game here. Although you lose maybe this pawn, but there are maybe some discovery attack possibilities on the a file by the rook. But still, I don't think that white should care simply for this pawn. It's time simply now to break the position with the move f3. So that's why after remove a5 we have a6, b takes c6, we have b takes c6, and now knight to b4. You see Fritz 2 has already a nice attack against the c6 weakness. We have queen to c7, knight to e2, and now knight to g4, because as we said, we want to protect simply this f4 move. This f4 move has to be protected because with the move knight to b4, white has left the defense of the f4 square, so that's why knight to e2 has to come now into the game. We have knight to g4, here we have queen to a4, and now a great move by Stockfish 13. Most of us probably play something like rook from f to c8 would defend this position, but not Stockfish 13. Stockfish found really here a great counter attack with the move rook to h8. And let's see now possible scenarios. If you take with the queen to f3, if that happens, then we can simply play queen to d8. And let's see now, if you maybe retreat with the queen again to play something, I think from a human's perspective this could be normal, maybe to retreat with the queen and then to try maybe something like knight to c6. Pause the video now and try to see in this particular line a great winning sequence. It's a forced checkmate here for black. You see how dangerous this Stockfish 13 is, what Stockfish has prepared here. This wasn't played in the game, but it was a great possible continuation. So again, test your might. So try to see now really the best next move. Okay, here the great move is the move rook to h1, deflecting one of these pieces, the king or the bishop. It's the same, because here if you play of course king to h1, then we simply play queen to h8, and then you get checkmated. So you're forced to play with the bishop to h1, then queen to h8 anyway, and you don't have now breathing spaces. You cannot escape with your king. You don't have time. That's the most important thing. If you try something like rook to c1, we'll simply play queen to h2. You have to move, and then queen to h1 is checkmate. Your knight is standing in the way. So to prolong the game, you would probably be forced to play something like rook to g2, king to g2, queen to h2. Anyway, after king to f3, now comes the stunner bishop to h5. After bishop to h5, it's a forced checkmate in one, because whatever you do, you get this discovered attack. Let's see now, maybe, I don't know, you get e4, then d takes e4. If you try maybe to maneuver the knight somewhere, pardon me, if you try to move the knight somewhere, then you go. Sorry about that, was too fast. Okay, let's go to this position. We said in this one, after the move rook to h8, if you try, as we said, queen takes c6, here queen to d8, and then here this one could happen, queen to h2, queen to f3, bishop to h5. Now we said this is a bad move, but if you move the knight anywhere, maybe to c3, then you get here a knight to e5. That would be a double check, and it's simply game over. That's the whole tactic, the whole tactical sequence after potential queen to a4. Sorry about this, messing up the position. So let's go now back. This wasn't played in the game. After the move rook to h8, here knight to c6 was played by Fat Fritz 2. Here we have bishop to e8, very dangerous stuff, because now the queen is in danger here, so that's why here Fat Fritz 2 took first the bishop on e7. We have knight to f6, we have c6, and now we can recapture the knight. Still, it's a very dangerous position, but I really like this knight here. I really like this knight, and our goal is now to get our knight here also maybe to e4. Again, this idea to get simply many attackers here on the h file is also very nice. So after move queen to e7, now comes the move f3. And what could you do? Maybe rook from f to c1, then queen to f7, again with ideas to sneak in with the queen. You see, again, it's very, very dangerous. Rook to c8 can, I think, block the position here on the c file, so no promotion is so far possible. This is, of course, a very dangerous pawn, but still you have to move the queen somewhere first, and you have to have new supporters in order to make something to happen here with this extra pawn. But still, I kind of like here, of course, the attack on the h file, and I think white could be really checkmated in a couple of moves if white doesn't play this game correctly. So that's why I think the activity of black's pieces is something that white has always to take care of. Here in the game after it was played, Fat Fritz 2 was simply annoyed by this powerful knight on e4, and we have now knight to e3, simply rook to e1, and simply queen to f7. And now the queen will find a way again into the game. We have queen to b3, knight takes g2, we have king to g2, and now bishop to c6, taking out the pawn. We have now a new position in which white is down a pawn. White has also now some problems on the h file. Of course, queen to h5 is not immediately now possible, because rook to h1 will happen. White will find ways how to compete on the h file, but still it's a very, very dangerous position for white. So queen to e3, attacking the pawn. We have rook to h5, protecting the pawn, g4. Very, very risky stuff. You see the position is already very shaky here for white. Here, Fat Fritz 2 tried at least some kind of attack. F takes g4, knight to g3 comes with the tempo in order to maybe take out here the pawn. But here it wasn't a possibility. Queen to g5 is simply not good. You get simply rook to g6. You have to move the queen somewhere, and then again g takes f3. Here we have the tension on the g file. It's simply a bad position. So here for white. So again, after the move rook to h6, rook to c1 was played, attacking the bishop, bishop to d7. Now rook to f1, here rook from a to h8. Now you see Stockfish 13 built simply this very powerful battery. So as I said, after this trade of pawns on the h file, I think black had really a comfortable game. Although the evaluation is not always showing who is better. It's simply sometimes in the Dutch defense, because white has the advantage of space. That's why in the Dutch defense sometimes the evaluation is so much higher than maybe in other openings. I think here by opening the H file, Stockfish 13 had really great attacking possibilities. Queen to G5 finally happens. You could also play Rook to G6, but here Queen to G6, it was even a better choice here by Stockfish 13, simplifying the position. King to G6, the king comes now very active in the game. King to Rook to H1, we have Rook to H1, Rook takes, and now Rook to C1. So also a very nice move, getting use of a new file. We have Rook to F1, Rook to C4, attacking the pawn on D4, F takes G4, Knight to G4, here Rook to C1, and now Rook to B4. Here Stockfish 13 is trying to stay with the pieces on the board, because these are opposite colored bishops. If this game goes now into a potential endgame with only pawns and only bishops on the board, then it's a forced draw. What only black needs to do is to build some kind of a fortress here, maybe place the bishop on E5. So as I said, black should never now trade more pieces. Black needs now to complicate things. Black needs now to make something happen because of the piece activity. And we can also notice that this knight is very powerful on G4. It controls also very important squares on the board. So bishop to C3, rook to B3. We have knight to F1, king to F5. Knight to D2, we have rook to A3, rook to F1. Now the king goes back to G6, but still this bishop is hanging. You have to take care of this bishop. Rook to F3, we have knight to H6. Here Stockfish 13 is trying to search new opportunities for the knight. The knight is a flexible piece. The knight will always find now good squares on the board, but you have to maneuver, of course. Bishop to B4, we have rook to A4 again. You see, Fat Fritz is trying to trade off more pieces, which wouldn't be a good choice. After rook takes F3, knight to F3, we would simply build a blockade. Knight to F3, bishop to C5, bishop to maybe B6, and it would be, I think, a draw game. So that's why the rooks have to stay on the board if you want to make something out of this endgame. Rook to B3, we have knight to F5, knight to F3, bishop to B5, rook to B2, and now the king can also play actively because both of these pieces are fixed. They're not loose on the board. They're simply supported by this pawn. That's why this rook can play more freely. We have bishop to C5, and now rook takes A5. Even if you try to maybe maneuver the bishop here, maybe to C3 or something, I think we can play simply rook to A3, again attacking the position. Even white has to defend. If you defend with the rook, then the rook can be attacked. So it's a misplaced bishop. It's simply too blocked out by its own pawns. And as I said in the beginning, if you remember, I've said that this bishop, the dark square bishop of white, can be many times a problem in Dutch defense games. Also, the light square bishop can be a long-term weakness in Dutch defense games from black's perspective, but I think so far Stockfish 13 has solved the positional problems of this bishop. This bishop has some kind of an activity, at least on this diagonal, although it's not attacking anything. So bishop to C5, here Stockfish 13 grabs another pawn. Knight to E5, we have rook to A4, rook to D2, and now rook to A1. We have rook to F2, and now king to G5, king to F3, knight to F5, king to G3, again a new check. We have king to G2, and now a very cool move, bishop to F1. Of course, if you take, then you get the fork, knight to E3, and you lose the exchange. So that's why here king to F3, we have rook to E1, knight to F7, the check, king to F6. Here a couple more checks were played, but now bishop to B5. If you take the bishop, it's not so good. A takes B5 will happen. If you try to attack, still we can play rook to E4. If you take, for instance, this pawn, we can play knight to E5, knight to D4. This wasn't played in the game, but let's see the possible continuation after bishop to D4, rook to D4, and black is continuing the game with two extra pawns, which is a theoretical endgame win for black. So after the move bishop to B4 was played, here rook to D1. Attacking now a new pawn in the position, bishop to C5, bishop to C4. We have king to G4, rook to E1, knight takes F5. We have rook to E4, king to F3 was played because if you go now too far away from the action, you will simply cut off here. That's the most important thing. The rook is cutting off the king's activity, so it would be a bad game. You have to take care of also this pass pawn here. The king activity is very important end game, so that's why king to F3 was played. But now again E takes f5, here rook to g2 a5, simply pushing the pawn further. We have rook to g8, bishop to e2, attacking the king, and now again pushing the pawn. You can play more checks, but now king to f6. Again, you cannot take out this pawn. Rook to f4. We have king to g2, rook to g4. Here fixing the pawn on with the move bishop to b3, rook to d6, king to f7, rook to b6, attacking the bishop, but nothing is dramatically changing. We have rook to bishop to c2, rook to a6, now simply pushing the pawn further. We have bishop to d6, bishop to d1, bishop to c5, f3. Again, you see how important this bishop is. Protecting both of these pawns. Now the serious threat is of course rook to g2, rook to a8, rook to g8. Here the position gets very stretched. That's, I think, something that you also should realize, because black has now 2 extra pawns. Okay, maybe the king can stop this one, but now after potential trade of rooks, black king will simply march here somewhere and will push this pawn, and in one particular moment black will have to give up maybe the dark square bishop for a pawn, and then black can go into, of course, a completely winning endgame. Here rook to a7, we have king to f6, rook to a6, king to f5, and now comes this move, rook to g2, rook to e3. Oh, new check. Here if you take, of course, you get the discovered check, rook to e7 and by the bishop, and you lose the rook. So that's why king to d3, bishop to c2, we have king to c3, f2. You cannot stop anymore this pawn. Rook to f3, bishop to d1, and after rook to g3 in this position, Fat Fritz to resign. Let's see now, king to f5 or something is possible, rook to f3. We can simply continue here and support this pawn and simply push it further. It was game over. So really wild game, but it was, as I said, many times we'll see this 100 moves games now in the top engine games. I think this end game was a little bit boring, but as I said, I wanted to show you all of the moves of the game. Maybe you can also apply some of these very important end game strategies in your own game. So as I said, but still a great attack, especially in a dubious opening like the Dutch defense here by Stockfish 13. Really wild game, and this was now the corporative revenge a little bit here on the board. Stockfish 13 outplayed Fat Fritz 2. We'll see now what will happen in the continuation of these games. I think we'll have really some wild games. Also Little C0 is there. We have also the Komodo Dragon. We have also some other great engines, and in the future I think we'll see also some beautiful games. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Really wild stuff. If you want to see more positional brilliancies and brutal attacks like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link. And if you like the games more by human, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.